I watched the first two episodes of Under the Banner of Heaven on FX, starring Andrew Garfield, Wyatt Russell, the comeback for Daisy Edgar-Jones, Sam Worthington. So a couple
It's the
of
comeback for Sam Worthington, my
right. I
guy.
guess the next like big thing we've seen Daisy Edgar-Jones in,
Yep.
right? After
Yep.
Normal People. So a lot of intrigue around this, adapting a John Krakauer book from early 2000s, based on a true story about the juxtaposition of the rising, or I don't know if that's the right word, the growth of Latter Day Saints religion, and then this murder from I believe it was late 90s. So
Yeah. 80s, 84.
sorry, 80s. Sorry. So a lot of there's a lot going on here. I think maybe the place to start is like you don't get Andrew Garfield on TV too much. How did you feel about him in these first two episodes? Did you like his performance? How were you feeling about it?
Yeah, I quite enjoyed Andrew Garfield in Under the Banner of Heaven to this point. I think he's a very convincing detective character, sure, but I think he's very convincing for this specific character, which I believe is just a fictional character for the sake of the story, not from the actual real life. This detective character, Garfield's great at this because he brings like the humanity that he always wears on his sleeve in all of his roles as an actor. He brings that to this character so perfectly because that's who this character is. This is a character who's very devout in his Mormon faith and his personal beliefs, and shows that, shows his true feelings when he's doing his job as an investigator, as a detective. And I think Garfield's a perfect fit for this kind of character, this kind of role. And I really love that they cast Gil Birmingham uh,
Yeah,
as his partner, the more grizzled, non-believer, non-Mormon detective. Of course, Gil Birmingham, everyone knows him from many supporting roles, like in Hell or High Water and Yellowstone. I think this is a great look for him. Great, and they have great
oh yeah,
chemistry for the first two episodes. But yeah, I think Garfield doing TV, um, leading role. I think he's perfectly cast for this kind of story, which I think kind of gives you a lot of the things you probably associate with these kind of like true crime miniseries, which is kind of the true detective the vibe, right?
right.
We have
Yeah,
we have cult status and fundamentalist religious groups, check. We have
yeah,
crisis of faith between the detective, check. Like it's all the things, starring movie stars. It has all the things we associate with True Detective and the appeal of that as a series, as a true crime series. This one just so happens to be based off real events from a John Krakauer book. John Krakauer, the author of Into the Wild and Into Thin Air. This is probably his third of his three big works. So I think it's a very appealing miniseries, and I think just having this kind of examination of the Mormon faith and the relationship with more fundamentalist groups, I think is obviously always prescient. But the fact that we're getting this tackled by Dustin Lance Black, someone raised Mormon, who also happens to be an Oscar-winning screenwriter, like there's just a lot of pedigree going on here.
yeah. I agree. I think Garfield is really good. I think what's tough is sitting with these characters who I may not totally align with their their perspectives on things. LDS ideology may not be the best fit for me, and it's funny because I feel like Garfield the whole time. Like if you're watching on YouTube.com, the picture I have in the background, he's looking so distressed, or the picture that Dave has is the cover, and he's like rubbing his hands like, on his forehead because he's so stressed out. And that's just him like these first two episodes. He's just so stressed this whole time. I'm like, damn, this guy really is going through it. I mean, given he witnesses and is investigating a grisly murder of a woman and a young child. So understandable that he might be feeling this way. But yeah, the way everything is kind of funneled through this lens of LDS really can be just like a turn off to me at points. But I agree. I think it's still really interesting, and I think one of the most interesting aspects of the LDS aspect of it is how they're juxtaposing him, who is very devout, but not, I wouldn't say fully extremist, with these people who are like
Right.
overly devout, extreme LDS, like very
Yeah.
rigid
Fundamentalist.
thinking. Yes, exactly. And how they perceive these things, and he's like, "Oh, I can't even get to the level of like what they consider a devout
Yeah.
person in this." So I think
Right.
that's pretty interesting to examine. Um, Yeah, and then I wanted to ask, like, Daisy Edgar Jones. How'd you feel about her in these first two episodes?
Yeah, well, I think she's good. The problem, of course, is that we have to experience her character only via flashbacks because she's the one who
Yes.
gets killed. So, in a sense, it's a bit of like the fridging dead girl detective thing that we know. But I think there's enough going on here that we go beyond that kind of trope, and it's kind of just all the flashback before we're gonna get Daisy Edgar Jones, and I feel like we kind of know a lot of these beats. I'm curious to see what else comes up in the subsequent 5 episodes we haven't seen yet, just because I feel like we kind of already know. It's like what why she pissed off certain people in the family, and why that probably drove the crazy people to kill her. Um, what else is there to glean from this character already? I'm actually kind of curious if there's enough meat on that bone. But Jones is Edgar Jones is good in it, and obviously a big fan of hers. This part of her early career. Um, I think that's another interesting aspect with the show too. Is we have three timelines. You have obviously the present day timeline with Garfield. You have all the flashbacks with the family, learning more about them, and I think that's important context, especially the way it's kind of being told. But the third timeline is probably the biggest challenge, which is seems very unnecessary, which is basically like a complete throwback timeline to the origins of Mormons and the Latter Day Church of Latter Day Saints, with following around Joseph Smith, the founder of the religion. Like, it also doesn't seem to add anything to the series through 2 episodes. I really don't know why we have that timeline at all, but I do like the past timeline with Daisy Edgar Jones, even if it can be a bit of a tough hang to be within this like brand of Mormonism that's very sexist.
Yeah, I think that's I think that is like a true nod to the book. You know, that choice to follow around the third timeline, like you talked about the
Right.
Joseph Smith story, and one that they definitely could have just like sprinkled in a little bit more than they have in these first two episodes. I found myself feeling completely taken out when they go back to that stuff because not only is it like incredibly brutal, and this is already a brutal story, but also like you said, just feels a lot less interesting, and I just did not really jive with that, but yeah, I think they were probably trying to rope in a lot of what Krakauer wrote as he's kind of comparing these
Yeah,
two
perhaps.
stories. Um, you know, there like we mentioned, there's a bunch of other people kind of as these supporting characters: Sam Worthington, Wyatt Russell, the guy who plays the husband Alan, Billy Howie gets a lot of
Yeah.
time in these first two episodes. Who stood out to you the most so far?
Right. And Roy Culkin as well, the youngest Culkin
Yes.
brother. Um, so I mentioned Gil Birmingham already, but of the other Laffertys, this family, the Utah Kennedys of as they're explained to us, it has to be Billy Howley for me, man. Alan, the one whose wife and child get killed. Because in those confessional scenes where he's just talking on the bench in the station to Garfield, that dude was like Michael Shannon in those scenes. I don't know
Yeah.
if you noticed that, but he sounded and had the mannerisms of Michael Shannon, which is a big compliment, obviously. I thought he was awesome in that. Billy Howley, he's been around. He was in Outlaw King, which of course was the most recent movie from David Mackenzie, who directed the first 2 episodes of this series. Um, yeah, I thought Howley was the clear standout. Sam Worthington, honestly, just happy to see him in something more high profile. He hasn't been around too much recently. Of course, he'll be back soon in Avatar too, but that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Howie clearly stands out. Like you mentioned, his mannerisms are so perfect, and like it really, just like they really capture you. They really grab you, and it feels very convincing the way he's kind of talking about all this stuff. I found all of that to be really great. I have to say, I think Wyatt Russell also, especially in episode two, has a couple of moments where you
Yeah,
start to see him kind of getting to show off a little bit, and I think just the way that when the dad leaves, how much he shifts and changes, and you kind of get more of the backstory about what kind of guy he is from his wife talking with Daisy Edgar Jones.
yeah,
I think that's all really, really interesting, and kind of seeing that
right.
character arc is cool to me.
Well, that's also what I appreciate about this show is it's very unflinching in its portrayal of the Lafferty family. It's like in a sense there's an objective way to tell this story because there's we're at the center of a real life crime here. There's a true crime angle to this, but the show is unflinching in its portrayal of the issues with the Mormon faith, or at least fundamentalist aspects of the Mormon faith. And I appreciate that, again, like Dustin Lance Black knows a thing or two about that coming from that world, and he's bringing that in, bringing that to us as the showrunner here. But I really like how they're kind of just putting on blast and making you think that these people are clowns, these people are jokes, and they're frauds. And you even have like Garfield, Detective Pyre. He's basically like he just kind of like shakes his head when he hears these like ridiculous, like crazy libertarian views of law and taxation and stuff. And it's like I like how they just don't hold anything back. And they just kind of blast these people.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that too. Yeah, it's definitely a show that has caught my interest. I'm looking forward to working my way through this. I think it's only like 6 episodes or something like that.
Yeah, I
So
think it's 7. So there's
seven.
5 more.
So probably in a few more weeks we'll be checking
FX
back
on
on it.
Hulu.
But give us your thoughts. Drop them below in a comment on what you think so far about Under the Banner of Heaven.